Welcome to WRM, Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach and host of this podcast. I specialize in healing work relationships. My guest is Keith Herron, retired office chief, data analyst, supportive services, and outreach at Caltrans, retired from Target Excellence, but now an educational consultant. He is here today to share his thoughts and experiences that I know will be beneficial to you. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Edward. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you. And Keith, I'm so glad to have you here because I see you on Facebook saying you do so many things and you're starting a new chapter in your life. We want to go into all those things that you've done over the years. But before we go to that, we want to learn more about you. We've gone to mixers before and everybody has their name tag on. And one of the first things people do as an icebreaker is say, "What do you do?" But before we start there, I'm going to know who you are. Growing up, people that influence you, events that may have influenced you, things that help you maybe shape the path that you took. So, where did it all begin? Tell us a little bit about your background growing up and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm from a small town in Cleveland, Ohio. It's called Warrensville Heights, Ohio. I was born and raised there from first grade all the way through graduation. And it was an all 100% African American community, very,
Mm-hmm.
very community oriented, and where everybody was family. And I really think that has really shaped the person I am today. I recently went back for my 40th class reunion. And believe it or not, one of my classmates is the mayor, Bradley Sellers, used to play for the Chicago Bulls, is the mayor of Warrensville.
Okay.
Me have another classmate who's the school board president, other classmates or people who went to Warrensville who are the superintendents of the school district on the board. I mean, in various capacities, a business manager, various
Mm-hmm.
capacities, and they are all going strong. And the city, to be a small city, population of about 14,000 people, but the
Mm-hmm.
district is doing very, very well, probably with an A plus or B rating. You know, they give schools districts rating theirs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so they have exceeded expectations
Mm-hmm.
for that. And I'm very proud of that. And that's really the basis of everything I do is Warrensville Heights, you know, where I was born and raised. And my father was a school teacher as well. So education
Mm-hmm.
is always important.
Now that is really very good at that. So what was in the water there that got everybody not only having that good foundation, but blossoming the way they did? I mean, that is just sounds great. So what was it about that community that helped make that happen?
I'm not sure. I just know it was people cared, you felt loved, you felt cared for. And I know that when I go back, that stuff still continues on to this day. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, especially in Black communities, a lot of people leave the community and don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare that people come back and still serve in the community. And the majority of
Okay.
people, I'm so proud of that fact that they all came back and support the community. And my mother still lives there, and they treat
Mm-hmm.
seniors. I mean, she's so happy being in that community, and I feel blessed to be a part of it, and hopefully continue its legacy.
So what was the industry there, the primary industry?
I say the primary industries there are the hospitals. There's a lot. I think Cleveland Clinic has some facilities out there. Amazon is in that area. So
Mhm.
those are the biggest two.
Okay. All right. So you left there when?
I left there right out of college. So I graduated
Mm-hmm.
at Ohio State University, and I
Mm-hmm.
graduated and I moved. I got a job with Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, right out of college.
Oh, I see.
Hmm.
And that's what brought you to California.
That's what brought me to California, and I worked there for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then out of there, then how did Target Excellence, where did that grow from?
Like I said, I've always had a passion for the community. And so while I was working for Caltrans, I actually did something called a Caltrans action request. And
Mm-hmm.
I did a limited term assignment in the Caltrans Adopt a School program. And so at that time, they sent me to the classroom to do science experiments. I was at Luther Burbank, and they sent me there to do science experiments. And it was so different from engineering. So, you know, when you're in engineering, you have a lot of science and a lot of math classes, chemistry, you know, thermodynamics, all those kind of stuff. And it requires that you buckle down and, you know, kind of stay in the books.
Right.
And so because of that, there was not a lot of, in college, I did not do as much, I didn't put as much value on the people relationships, talking about working relationships, because, you know, you had to study, so I didn't have time for all that.
Right.
We did pledge a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, and that's what got me into community service. And so once they took me to the classroom, it really reminded me about my days in Alpha Phi Alpha. Because when we were there, we were very community oriented. We did the first Black homecoming at Ohio State, which is still going on to this day. And so I think that's what, you know, really made me, I think you said, I think that career chose me, actually.
Okay.
When I went there, I found out it was so much fun, and it reminded me actually of being in the fraternity that I loved it. And I did both. I worked at Caltrans and Luther Burbank at the same time. So I would spend 1 day a week in the schools and 4 days a week at Caltrans. And eventually, you know, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I had to make a decision. And so I decided to do the business full time.
Now, did Caltrans help support it when it became full time, or how did it sustain itself financially?
You know, they did support it initially. They paid me. I was getting paid while I was at Caltrans. So they paid me to go to those classrooms and support those students 1 day a week, which was really a blessing when you think about it. I really appreciate it. But it gave me the groundwork to develop and nurture the organization until it grew on its own, eventually serving approximately about 2,500 students every day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that is a lot. It was
very large. Yeah, it was large. It was large, a lot of staff. It grew really, really enormous. And it was kind of, I would say, all encompassing. You know, it was like one of those 24/7 jobs. So after a while, about in 2017, I started saying, you know, I'd like to step back a little bit and do less. You know, as you get older, you want to step back and do a little bit less. So that's
right. I don't know if I've lost the sound or.
Oh, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I did. I decided to leave in 2017.
Now, when you were there and once you left Caltrans, you had to just do the staffing, the budgeting. Now, after you left Caltrans, you know, that 1 day a week, and then you were doing it maybe 24/7, where did that money come from?
I was lucky enough to get a lot of contracts. The engineering perspective, from day one, when I first started the program, I always did data analysis. You know, I measured after every program, I did it pre-post measurements. I would do experimental control group measurements to test the effectiveness of the program. And I did literally every quarter for 25 years. I would collect data, analyze the data, and tweak the data. You know, before I started the program full time, I worked on my master's degree, and I did a regression analysis about the factors that were directly tied to academic success. And I tried to make sure that I put all those components into my program. And then I tried to measure the effectiveness of the program each quarter. And I would tweak as I go along. You know, if something wasn't where I wanted it to be, I would tweak it and add. And it became like literally a 36-week curriculum divided into 4 quarterly units that included components for family engagement. It included components for social emotional learning. It included components for academics, and not just homework help, but real world academics, so that students could learn by doing project-based learning and service learning. And so I loved it, and it was very effective, and I was very happy with the results that we had. We also did supplemental educational services, and that's when you do after school tutoring. And we were actually able to help 7 sites exit program improvement, which means that they met their federal and state standards for 2 years consecutively And that's how you exited out of for academic standards. They met those academic standards for 2 consecutive years, and that's how they were able to exit out of program improvement. So I'm very proud of that as well.
Okay, and that was at Luther Burbank?
That was at Kit Carson, John Slow.
Okay.
There were 7 different sites. Noralto, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the names of all of them. But there were 7 different sites that we helped exit out of program improvement.
Mm-hmm.
There's no child left behind.
So your program was supplemental to the school. So would you consider yours an after-school program, or was it some of it in school time, or how did that whole thing merge?
It was all supplemental. So it was after school. But when I did the career counseling piece initially through Caltrans, it was in school. So I would literally take over a class during the school day for 1 day per week. I would take over one class, a different class, but I take 4 or 5 classes in a day, but different students, of course. But I would class 1 day a week.
Okay. All right. Now, what was the demographic makeup of the schools? Was it primarily minority, or was it a mix of everybody, or what was that?
It was a mix of everybody, but it was primarily low income because most of the kids had to be eligible for free and reduced lunch programs, call them Title I.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to be eligible for free and reduced lunch programs. And because of that, I would say most of them were low income. And so it was very, very diverse. African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, it was the full gamut.
Right. Well, a lot of people are interested in helping students, especially students of color, with the way things are with the achievement gap, et cetera, but maybe not know how. And so you've got a lot of the tools that are necessary to make that work. So in terms of if someone else wanted to do something like this, what advice would you give them?
Number one is understand that we have to meet students where they are. Our students are brilliant, all of them. They all have some different type of skill set, but it's about meeting them where they are and making sure that the material you present, in my opinion, is focused on them. In student-based project learning, a lot of times you don't even have to tell them what to do. They'll do it themselves, as opposed to saying, we're going to study fractions. Kids like, oh, I don't like fractions. But if you said, oh, you were supposed to work 5 days a week and you only work 3 days, and instead of getting $100, how much would you get? Then they would figure that out, because it's making the educational experience personal for them.
Making it real. So it almost reminds me of what we used to do way back in the day, the thing called story problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where you instead of saying this is the math number, you said, well, somebody said if you're traveling at 60 miles an hour and somebody's traveling at 80 miles an hour to a certain destination, how much faster would the one person get there than the other? Which was kind of like a story problem if you're traveling with family.
Yes.
I'll see you at a certain time, and if you're going at this speed, I'm going at this speed. So was it kind of like that?
Very similar to that. And when we did the service learning, it was really more about, how would you want to make your community better?
Mm-hmm.
And then they would come up with different ideas, and vote on those ideas. We gave them a budget. We were able to, purchase materials and things of that nature. They said timeline. And then we had them monitor their progress, exactly how I did in Caltrans. Because when I was in Caltrans, I worked as a project manager. So every 6 weeks, we had to discuss what % complete we were at. And so I had my students do that, with their projects, calculate their percentage completes every week, and create a timeline, almost like a real business. I said, they were so engaged because they were like, this is real work. I mean, even though the academic piece is still there was a lot of writing, math, public presentations, all of that involved. But it was something that was important to them, which made all the difference in the world. So how students say, oh, I don't want to do math, it's boring, blah, 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 blah. But if you let them play a video game, they can play a video game for hours. Or if you let them listen, they can listen to music for hours. It's a matter of making sure that you're buying into their interests and putting those same academic lessons in areas where they feel like that's important to them, because they pay more attention to it. They're more precise. They're more interested in the results, and they're more interested in making it happen.
Now, parents, how were parents engaged? Because the thing that I hear with a lot of places is that the kids don't get the support at home for what they're doing in school. How did you help navigate that?
So the way I navigated that was it was actually multifaceted. I believe that parent engagement is not about I talk and you listen, but we actually talk to each other and spend time together and develop a relationship and get to know each other. So at the end of every quarter, I would actually have a family engagement night where the students would share the projects that they did with their parents. I loved it, and it was very well attended. So generally, my family engagement nights would have at least 60 to 70 parents there. I loved it because I love seeing the parents, supporting their kids, taking pictures of their kids, because it lets the kids know that they matter. The kids got something out of that. And so the kids would run the entire program. So the parents would come to that. They also did a weekly texting system where I would text the parents each week, letting them know, the lessons that we went through that week and giving them some suggestions on what they could work with their kids at home or questions that they could ask them about the day. So instead of saying, how was school today? They could say, tell me what you learned about fractions, or tell me what you learned about. So they were plugged in by using a texting system. We've been using a texting system probably, I want to say, since easily, I'd say before 2000, maybe about 2004, 2005. But because, that was very new. So a lot of times parents may not answer a letter or may not look at an email. But if you send a text, a text has to be 25 characters or less or something around that number. And it's easy.
Right.
I could tell who responded. They were able to reply if they wanted. So we developed a relationship where they heard from us on a regular basis, and the parents were very, very engaged.
Right. Okay. Now, do you have stay connected with those kids from way back when? Do you know where they are now or how they're doing and how
I have seen some of them. I have seen some of them. Believe it or not, my first class, I saw one of my students at the gym. He's 43 now.
Okay.
And he worked for corrections. And so I have kept in touch with a lot of them. It's amazing. I'm really happy to see them developing. Some of them are in college. It's been years. Some of them are in college, some of them are still in school, but I'm just happy. One time I went to I went to vote, and one of my students was working at the voter registration, the voter booth. And she was part of our student government. And I was like, so cool. I feel like, I won't say it was because of me, but I feel like I definitely had some influence. I think the program, not me, I'm sorry, but I think the program definitely had some influence on them. And I think it was very helpful for them. I think anything you do with our students today that is positive and warm, it's going to have an influence on those students because they don't get a lot of that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's probably a combination of both when you think about it, because I think you said using the sports analogy, they said it's not always the X's and the Joes, X's and the O's, it's the Jimmys and the Joes. So you got to have a good system, and you got to have good people in there to make the system run. So I think that was going to be a good mix, and the chemistry worked really, really well. Now, did you ever work with the Fortunes? I know they do a lot with closing the achievement gap and those kinds of things. So do you connect with them? Or I know Alan Rowe was trying to get more, particularly African-American students into college. So did you connect with them? Was there a kind of a handoff there?
Yes, I did work with Dr. Rowe, and we did a program called Get Your Hustle On, where we helped students. It was a summer program where we helped students fill out their college application and complete their college portfolios. I also did a training for Miss Fortune, and I also, toured her sites, and I'm very proud of the work she's doing, and I salute them all. I salute anybody who's giving their all to their students. There's a lot of other positive organizations out there that are doing good things. Improve Your Tomorrow, Project Optimistic, Architects of Hope. I'm very proud of them, and all of them have worked with me or for me in some capacity before. And so I'm very proud of all the work that they're doing, and I salute them.
Absolutely, and that's just good having all working together. Because I've got a person, as I said, I'm a life coach. So she was talking to me about something. I thought it was just a one-off, that she had a question that she had, but she wants to start a tutorial program, particularly for African American high school students, because during the pandemic, her daughter was working from home and needed tutorial help and had difficulty finding it. So she's got great passion, but doesn't have a lot of the background and connectivity like you have. So what advice would you give her to kind of find her way with the passion is there, but the background and the connections are not at this point?
Well, what I would say is number one, it starts with passion. So she's in the right area if she has a passion for it.
Right.
And number two, I always believe in systems. Yeah, as an engineer, and I always said this to my students, I was in roadway design. And if you look at roadway design, it's amazing how we can move millions of people all over the world with the same like symbols, signs, colors. You can see a stop sign and everybody knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
What language you speak.
Right.
Think about it. Every day we transport millions, if not billions of people across our roads. Now, sure, there are some, but when you consider getting billions of people to follow the same rules and go in the same direction, it's amazing. And it's a system. And I really believe that systems are the solution to academic success. I really believe in that. And so I would say develop a system, develop a curriculum, know what your goals are, and make sure you have those components into your system. And when you look at how students learn and how classwork, how teachers teach, it's all about routine and repetition.
Right.
Once a student understands the routine, they feel more comfortable with it and they're more apt to try it. If it's changing every day and somebody's struggling, they're going to want to quit because it's like, I don't know what to do. This is too hard, too difficult. They're more or less apt to try it if there's not a routine or a structure that they can become familiar with.
Right. Absolutely. Now, the one thing that I get into, because I'm a work relationship coach, and obviously you've done some great things, shown great leadership. So when did you realize that you were a leader? And what is your leadership style?
So, actually, in my opinion, leadership was never one of my goals. I was always really into, seeing the results and making the results happen.
Right.
My leadership style is very hands-off. I like to tell people exactly what I'm looking for. I like to tell them, I based it off of a book called E-Myths by Michael Gerber.
Okay.
And that it said, literally, you need to list every single step, because if you don't tell people what to do, they do nothing. I always, in everything I do, I have specific steps, and then I also have a regular reporting system where I hear back on what you got done, what you were having problems with, and where you needed input. But I believe in letting people find their own way. I believe in regular check-ins. And leadership is really all about performance management more than becoming someone's friend.
Okay, so basically make sure they know what they need to do, then follow up and make sure they did it.
Yeah, and being able to manage that performance.
Right. So what is the toughest situation you faced and how did you handle it?
Oh my God. So many tough situations. Toughest situation I would face, I would say, would be what do you call when somebody goes off on their own?
One rogue or whatever, or
rogue board members. That's probably my toughest situation. Rogue board members who, just wanted to do things their way, even though it wasn't the right way. And by any means necessary, hook or crook, lie, cheat, steal. That's pretty my toughest situation, easily rogue board members.
And how'd you handle it?
I just try to do the best that I can and keep that same system in place. That's all, because I know what my formula is for success, and I just try to keep everybody, on that formula. So it keeps going back to, what are the basics, which was what teachers do all the time as well.
Now, did you have to, I know the board, they're elected, right?
Yes. But they're my boss. So it's kind of a, a touch and go situation.
Yeah, so you've got to want to toe the line, but I guess in substance, they tell you what to do, not the reverse.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely
Right.
the hardest situation.
Okay. Yeah, because many times the boss is the boss
Right.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you find most rewarding about the things you've done over time? The things you say, "Oh my goodness, I'm just so blessed to have had this opportunity, and I feel this way about whatever they." So, what is has been most rewarding for you?
So many rewards. So many rewards that I always say that, if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I'm very happy with my life.
Mhm. Okay.
Seeing the data, helping people, seeing things copied and repeated. Do you know what I mean? I think that's it's
Mhm.
it's it's annoying, but at the same time, it's flattering because if people are copying you, you must be doing something right.
Right. That's right. The sincerest
Then
form of flattery.
yes, yes, and then seeing things continue, like I talked to you about the homecoming, the Black home
Mhm.
still going on to this day. My first project at Caltrans one was the 105 freeway. Just to see,
Right.
from the ground up, people traveling. When I drive on, I'm like, oh my God, I remember when this was, just dirt. Um,
Right.
and then also, running a successful business and growing it consistently for 25 years. Um, Seeing my children become entrepreneurs. I have two children who are also successful entrepreneurs. Um, so, that's just so amazing to me, and then of course having a loving family, is very cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
So,
being,
what?
and going back to Warrensville, like I just went back to Warrensville and it was absolutely
Right.
so that too.
Right. So, looking forward, what's in your future?
Right now, I'm really interested in mental health, especially around the pandemic. And I'm really trying to develop a curriculum and really work a pilot project where I tie academics to mental health. Um, and so I'm not a social worker or anything like that. But I was lucky to participate. I also serve on the board of an organization called On Track, uh,
Mhm.
which does a mental health first aid training. And so I was able to take that training and it was amazing. And I really understand that the biggest thing that we can do for anybody, not only youth, but adults, is to teach coping strategies as you go through trauma. And so my goal right now is to leverage those coping strategies and tie an academic component to that and make it align with Common Core and to help students to learn academically while they're improving their mental health.
So, would you connect with schools to do this, or how would you connect this to the population you want to serve?
Right now, I would like to. I haven't. I'm only at one site right now. I'm doing a training for one site right now, but eventually,
Okay.
I'd like to get the curriculum solidified, and I would like to use it as an intervention because a lot of
Hmm.
now because students are so far behind because of the pandemic, they need interventions. So, what better
Right.
intervention to have than to tie academics and healing through trauma at the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So so right there, that's a great segue because if people want to learn more about this, how do they contact you, or is there a website, social media? What would you say, people? I want to be a part of this. I want to learn more about it. How would they contact you, or where would they go for more information?
Sure, they can contact me at my email. I don't have a website yet, but I am working on one. But the email is targetexcellence@yahoo.com or kherron@targetexcellence.org. Also, I'm working on updating my Facebook page eventually. I'm getting around to that, but a Facebook page and an Instagram page. But the email is
Great.
excellence@yahoo.com or kherron@targetexcellence.org.
Okay. Well, Keith, thank you so much for this information. That's just a wealth of information. And the 30 minutes, as I mentioned, just goes so darn fast. Is there any last words that you'd like to give before we sign off?
I would just like to say thank you, Edward, for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it, and I appreciate being having opportunity to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you. And folks, this is WRM Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, The Edward Jones, a certified life coach, host of this podcast, and also author of the book, Office Politics the Right Way, the 7 Principles to Create Win-Win Work Relationships in the Workplace. To learn more about my coaching, go to www.prodestinycoaching.com, take the Work Relationships quiz. Let's have a conversation because you're eligible to win a 50-minute complimentary coaching session. Remember, work relationships work for those who work on them. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Welcome to WRM, Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, The Edward Jones, a certified life coach and host of this podcast. My guest is Brigitte Hart. She specializes in separation and divorce coaching for men and facilitates family mediation. She is here today to share her thoughts and experiences that will be beneficial to you. Welcome, Brigitte.
Hi, Edward. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm so glad to have you here. And it's interesting how we met on LinkedIn, and we are how many hours apart? 12 hours?
I am 15 hours ahead of you, so it is 5 a.m. here in Perth.
Okay, all right. I'm glad you're an early riser. So I'm in the for folks that you don't know, it's 2 o'clock here where I am in California. But Brigitte, I looked at you on LinkedIn, and I see you have a very successful practice, and that's always important. And I remember going to different events, and people have their name tags on, and people ask, the first question they ask people is, "What do you do?" But for me, I always like to know who people are. So I'd like to get a little bit of background, where you grew up, maybe significant experiences when you were a child, things that along that line, so we get to know more about who you are before we start talking about what you do. So can you give us a little background?
So I was born in Zimbabwe, in Africa, and my family moved to South Africa when I was, I think, about 4 or so. And I grew up there. Loved it, loved the freedom of the space and the animals. And, you know, I had a very close-knit family, a very big family. I'm the only girl in a family of all boys, extended family as well. So it was a pretty good childhood, I'd say, until my parents got divorced when I was 8.
Okay.
And that was probably the first biggest impact in my life, because I was always very close to my father, and just he still is the coolest father in the world and still a huge mentor, and finished school and did uni and went over to London, and started off in financial law and regulation in the company over there. Yeah, which was just totally not my personality. I'd always grown up with animals and loving people and really wanted to know more about people. And so I think whatever you choose in life, you're always interconnecting with other people and understanding and hearing the stories.
Where were you in the birth order?
I am the second.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So I'm the baby of my family, and my brother is older. So
okay, all right. Well, great. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just always interesting to know where people are in the birth order, because sometimes that makes a difference as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, but you were talking about the financial services and how you got into that.
Yes, and so I landed up with the next best mentor, who was and still is a mentor in my life now, who helped me all the way, held my hand in learning a whole new career in a whole new country, a whole new city. I'd gone from this tiny little town in Africa to London town, and was quite intimidating because of very different culture and way of life over there. And just slowly grew those skills in sort of anti-money laundering. And just developing that. And then I left there and met my husband there, and left and moved to Sydney in Australia, and we lived there for a few years before then moving to Cairns and on to Hong Kong, where I spent 11 years, and before then getting divorced. So there would be probably one of the biggest moments of my childhood divorce and my own divorce. And that was a very pivotal, changing moment. And that sort of led me into divorce coaching. It was my lawyer in Hong Kong that said to me, I would employ you and train you as a divorce coach for you to come and work for my firm, because of the way in which, and of course there's a lot more depth to this, but because of the way in which I dealt with my own divorce. And I said to him, nah, I'm leaving Hong Kong and I'm moving to sunny Perth, and there's nothing's going to stop me. But I'll keep it in mind. Yeah. So
right.
That's kind of probably where the divorce coaching then started.
Right. But there's a lot of stuff
so much stuff always.
I think about, you're starting out in I guess a kind of a rural area with animals. Parents get divorced, and I guess you have to move with one of the parents or the other one, I'd imagine. And was that why the moves were made to South Africa?
No, the move to South Africa was made already, and the divorce happened, I think, 5 years after that.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a very traumatic time. I remember it very clearly. I think it changed my view of myself and the view of my world as well.
In what way?
I think in that time, in the 80s in South Africa, people didn't get divorced. It was very unacceptable. And I think I was one of two in my school who were divorced. And so their parents wouldn't let the kids play with me because I came from a divorced family. And there was a lot that went on. I shut down as a little person. I shut down and kept everything internalized. I had one parent that got better, not bitter, and one parent that got bitter. And I had two polar opposites of each other. And I understood then that it's very hard for children in divorce, because you're always torn. You're torn between parents. You love them equally, and you want to be with both of them equally. And when you have one that's not okay with the other, and you grow up in quite high conflict, it impacts your world. It really does. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so it does. It impacts your world. It impacts how you feel about you, because if you've got one parent that's saying nasty things about the other one, it's literally half of you. So half of you is not allowed to be. You don't know how to be with that parent, because you feel like, well, I'm made up of both of you, but if one half of me isn't good, then what does that make me?
Right.
And so I'll say it with, my mom and my dad are very, very different. I am just like my father. I look like my father. I talk like my father. I have the same, what do you call it? Love of people and curiosity about why. There's always a reason behind a reason, and wanting to get to the bottom of it. So I understood who my mom was as a person and why she was like she was, and understood why my dad was like he was as a person. But and that's why divorce coaching, I think, is so important, because people don't know what they're doing. They don't know the effects of what they're doing to themselves and to their children ultimately.
Absolutely.
And, the lasting effects of it. So so I had no confidence growing up. I didn't really believe in myself. I, sort of didn't really feel like I belonged in the world, in a sense. I didn't know where I belonged, and really try to navigate my way through life, made some really stupid decisions and did some really stupid things, as we do growing up, but ultimately trying to navigate my way through the world.
So I don't know how to cope, I guess, because I'm thinking about that is pretty traumatic. And so
absolutely,
you have develop coping mechanisms. So what did you do to help you cope?
I loved sport. I loved hockey. it was where I felt free, and I was quite a good hockey player. So that was where I felt like I excelled. That was one part of it. I didn't get to see my dad as often as I wanted to, or probably needed to. When I did see him, the conversations between him and I were always honest and vulnerable. And so I could talk to him about anything. I still can to this day. And that was, he used to, what would you call it? He would put foundations down. So he always said to me, there's nothing as a negative. Everything is a positive. Learn to embrace he uses the word shit in your life, because that's how you learn to grow. And he always had a very positive view of the world. And he would take my language and reframe it into something more positive. And so those foundations, which I'd grown up with, I always used to pull on. I used to pull on those to try to get myself through. It would be like, okay, well, this is a positive, like this horrible thing is happening, but what's the positive out of it? And then heading into teenage years, which is vulnerable for all teenagers. All of us have been in teenage years. It's the most awkward, vulnerable time you go through. And I lost a lot of that. My dad moved away to England, and so I lost a lot of that. So the coping mechanism was I basically shut down, and I didn't talk very much about stuff, or I would exude happiness and try to make everybody else feel better, because at that point in time I was having to carry a parent quite a lot. So there wasn't any room for my emotions. So yeah, the coping mechanism was to shut myself down.
And basically, and help out that other parent. Now you got into financial, which is, again, we're going to get to the divorce coaching, but the financial. So you went through all this trauma, you got your coping measures, and then you got into finance. So what got you into financial services? What was it? Somebody that you knew, or how did that come about?
Well, I actually wanted to go into family law.
Okay, all right.
And my dad said to me, no. He went, it's too much. You're too young. You haven't even remotely got to deal with the consequences of your own divorce, and you really don't want to. You really don't want to go into something like that until you're ready. So I went into financial law. I'd always had an ability to pick up number patterns and work out why something was like it was. And it was more intuition based than it was training. So to be able to see where money's gone and it doesn't quite make sense, and then sort of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And there's that curiosity that I was raised with, of why, and looking deeper into these, the financial year end statements, and wondering if are they right, and sort of I really wanted to go into more forensic accounting, but I think the financials or numbers were neutral because they weren't people. So you could do something that was with numbers, but you didn't really have to deal with people so much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Now this is what I really want to know. How you made that break from that and got into be the separation and divorce coach for men.
Well, now that's a journey, and you talk about being an entrepreneur. I think the biggest thing about being an entrepreneur is constantly refining what you're doing. So I studied life coaching, and I absolutely loved it. And I love listening to people and setting goals and helping them work towards what they want to achieve out of life. And from there, I thought, no, I really want to go into relationship and divorce coaching. And so I did. I studied through the CDC over in Florida and went on into that, which is, I think my divorce, and I'll just go back to my divorce, was such a huge moment in my life. And the reality of my divorce, that my ex-husband, I didn't particularly want a divorce, but he was the one that instigated the divorce. And I understood why. I understood what was happening, but I understood as well and observed in him that he couldn't express his emotions. And although he was the one that wanted the divorce, for years afterwards, he suffered emotionally. So I'd sit there with him when he picked up the kids, and and ask him how he would feel, and there would always be tears, and he was hurting, and sort of thought, this doesn't really make sense to me as to why you feel that you do, but this is what you wanted. But I'd made a decision on our divorce that I was going to basically I was going to take the best out of my parents from their divorce, and do that for my children. And so that's kind of where it sort of started, was the focusing on the children. And so when I got into divorce coaching and studying it, my whole thing was wanting to support children. But then as the course went along, it became apparent that in order to help the children, you have to help the parents. And through the coaching and through understanding, the neuroscience and emotions and everything else that we go through in divorce, it started to make sense as to how I felt and why my parents' divorce affected me. But then it also gave me an idea of what was happening to my parents, both of them individually in their divorce. And so I learned so much from that course. And then I went into talking to my dad more. So then the course opened up conversations between my father and I about what he felt through the divorce and his absolute vulnerability. And as a man, and listening to him saying, what did I do? I was providing, I was working towards having to have the house and pay for the kids and, pay for the family. And all it became was a paycheck. I became a paycheck. I got basically dissolved as a person and was a paycheck. And so we explored that, and I started to learn about the impact that the divorce had on him, which I wasn't aware of as a little girl, or in the younger years. And then I really started to get into understanding men, and because I'd grown up with men, it was a natural fit for me. And I started to look at stats of men's mental health and other family members that had gone through divorce. I was having conversations with them, and a lot of sort of male friends would talk to me about their relationship issues. And it all became apparent I wanted to know, and I said to my dad once, why can't men talk? Why can't they express themselves? And my dad said to me, when you've been suppressed for so long, and you were told how to be a man, and that didn't include emotions. So then you go to that lot and naming emotions. He was like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't express myself. I didn't know how to express myself. So it either turned to anger or to sort of shame as a person, as a man. And so again, I kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I thought, well, who's there in the divorce coaching? Who's helping men through the divorce? So it's easy to say they hit a midlife crisis, or they've lost the plot, or all the things I'd listened to, but it's enormous what men go through in divorce. And so through each client, there's been the same emotions. They don't want the relationships with their children, the effects, the stress management, which affects their work, their productivity levels. It affects their relationships with their co-workers, with friends, with family, with children, with the ex, and a lot of the time, I think it looks like a great big ball of spaghetti. And without that, you're just a jumbled mess. But working, yeah.
That is interesting, though, because I think about it, and I think you and I talked about this, that at one point I was looking at working with men, but my certification program said that men don't talk, so it may not be a good place to go, but you've definitely got in there. And so when we talk about, you got your father to open up. Now, was that because you all had gone through the same thing, or what was it that got him to open up where he couldn't do it before?
He could do it before, but not to the extent that he did.
Okay.
I think when you're not judgmental, and you're compassionate, and you're open to listening to somebody and really listening, wanting to hear their story, and of course they come in with a story that is theirs, and you start to explore it. And I think just that holding the space for somebody to be vulnerable and honest is huge, and dealing with it with no judgment and with compassion is enormous.
But now the thing I think about is, the question I was going to ask you about your calling and did your career choose you, or did you choose it? It sounds like it chose you because of some of the things some of the experiences that you went through and how you look at overcoming those things. And so you became an instrument to help others through a situation that you saw the need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like I was made to do what I'm doing. And I didn't realize that even just the simplicity of being born into a family of all boys, and that's what I got to know. All the way from then to now, that's what it's been. And I'm also a mum to a son and 2 daughters. So navigating how you parent and looking at my son and thinking, well, I don't want you to grow up like this. I want you to grow up expressing your emotions and understanding them and learning to master them, and being kind to yourself. So yes, it found me, and for multiple reasons, but it's definitely what I was meant to do.
Definitely. Now, in your work, the thing that you mentioned too is like how that affects men in the workplace, and so they could be going through something at home, but it affects them in the workplace. So, do they recognize that?
Not very often, no.
Okay.
Not very often. I think what you have to also understand is for a lot of men, they don't know how to express themselves, so they don't know what they're feeling. And I've come to learn that men tend to live in their heads, which is not good at all, because you land up, with a sort of concertina effect of all these negative thoughts about yourself, or the shame of, going to work, going through the divorce, and, are people judging me, that I've lost my family is what I've heard. And really coming to a dead end. So yes, and going into work, they don't always know what's affecting them. They don't know that the crossover from home into work, or the degree of how it affects them. Because productivity decreases by about 50 to 70%.
Through divorce?
In divorce, yes.
Oh my goodness, that is something that, again, I think employers need to be sensitive to. And I know that a lot of men don't like to go to counseling, don't like to go to doctors. So the thing about it is, how do you get them? Because you're a coach and working with them. So how do you get them to break out of that shell, to take that armor off?
Well, this is a funny one, because I've never had a client approach me asking for divorce coaching.
Okay.
So I've had clients ask me, do I have recipes that they can make with their children, because they are tired of coming home late and getting takeaway every night, and they'd really like to learn how to cook with their kids or provide better meals for their kids. I have asked people to help me, people ask me to help them with tax returns. I've had people ask me to help them with their accounting. I've had people call me up to understand what's happening with their child and how to better that relationship. And also, my daughter's going to a formal, she needs a dress. I don't know where to go. My ex-wife's told me that it's on my weekend, therefore it's my financial responsibility. She wants to get her nails done. What do I do? So that's another thing too. And also, just going back to what you were saying, is men don't talk. Well, men don't talk face to face. They'd like to have to talk side to side. Right. So, because it's quite confrontational for them. And if you watch men, when they're lined up, like say at a bar, for instance, they're generally not facing each other one-on-one. they're kind of to the side.
Right.
Watch the body language. So through all of those ways in which clients approach me, it then starts to filter out into the divorce coaching, because you're alongside doing something else. So I then refined my business again to incorporate personal brand management and new home assistance and interior design.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they're looking for more functional stuff.
Absolutely.
And then you get them into the affect.
Yes. And so
Wow.
by being alongside them doing something, they're then able to talk. Yeah.
Got it. That's brilliant.
So there's my skill in finance as well coming into it, because
Right.
it's like, what do we need to do to sort you out financially and get your budget going? And what does this look like? So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So what's the toughest situation that you had to handle, and how did you handle it?
With a client.
Yeah. Or anything you want to mention.
Well, I had one client that said to me, and it's a tough one because as a coach, you're a coach. You're not a psychologist or psychiatrist. Right. Okay, so there's certain lines that you don't cross. And I had one client that said to me, "I don't want to be here anymore." And immediately I thought, okay, like, what do I do in this situation? Because I understand the stats of male suicide. And I said to him, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, "I don't have a purpose in life anymore. Like, what's the point? I'm divorced. I'm getting divorced." And he was really down, and I could see he was really depressed, and I worried about him. So we had one session, and I thought, I said to him, maybe you might want to go and speak to a psychologist about how you're feeling. And he said, no, I'm not going to one of those doctors, and they don't understand. And that was quite scary. That was the first person, that was one of my first clients. But that scared me, because I sort of thought, oh my God, what happens if he does do something? And you worry about a person. We did leave that session a lot more positive than he started out in, but that was concerning initially. And subsequently, he did continue to carry on being my client, but we found his purpose, which wasn't about, he reconnected to something back in his childhood that he loved doing, which was boats and that. And so, he started to build a motor with his son and get back into boating. And now he mentors younger boys and takes them out, to go and learn how to crab or to fish, and gets alongside other boys. So he found his sort of purpose in life after that, but something that he needed to reconnect to. Right. So that would probably have been a very scary moment, the scariest one I've dealt with a client.
Absolutely. And so that sounds very rewarding, but I'll ask the question anyway. What is most rewarding about your work?
Watching somebody reconnect to themselves and get stronger and better and to move forward. Because my job is to make myself redundant, is to get alongside somebody to help them get to where they need to be. And watching people flourish is enormous. And having a positive mindset about themselves, their view of the world, and really letting go of the past. Well, that's it for me. At the moment I see somebody really starting to get re-energized and move forward, is why I do what I do.
Well, that's excellent. And definitely this is what you were called to do. You've got that passion. You probably, I'm glad you get paid, but you probably would do it for free because of what you benefit from in terms of helping other people.
Yeah, I'd love to win the lottery and then just kind of spread myself out and give it to everybody for free. But it doesn't work that way, does it?
Right. One question is kind of a side, but a just interesting thing, because you mentioned about your father being kind of very out there in terms of talking with people, maybe your mother being a little bit quieter, you being maybe more talkative, your ex-husband maybe being more quiet. Do you find a lot of couples where there's opposites attract, at least initially?
Yes, They initially they do. And actually, you just touched on something that I've started to kind of really research in the last 6 months, because they say opposites attract.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that they do. I think because if you're so opposite, what have you got in common?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you fit together if you're opposites? I mean, it's good to be, you have to do you, and the other person has to do the other person.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you have to have something very similar together. And more of that than being opposite. Yeah.
Right. Because what I find, sometimes people are very different to start because it's interesting. And then pretty soon the interest wears off because you're not like me, you're different. So the difference brings them together, and the difference pulls them apart sometimes, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because people do, we're you know, as human beings, we're meant to evolve, and we're meant to grow. And, you know, I think it's very difficult to do that together unless you're actually 100% committed to making sure that that is exactly what you do every single day. To me, it makes more sense that if you've got a lot more in common, that's easier to do than being opposites. But yeah, it's because we do evolve enormously. Yeah.
And it takes work. And that's why with my motto, work relationships, well, all relationships work for people who work on them. But when people stop working on it, I think that may be when they kind of, things go a little sideways. But before we go, is there anything else that you wanted to share with people, a question that I didn't ask you that you think I really want to make sure that the listeners hear this? Is there anything like that?
Divorce isn't the end.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it, and it can feel really traumatic, and you can feel lost, but it isn't the end. Divorce can also be the end of something, but the beginning of yourself, of finding yourself. And there's, you know, there's an end, but when there's an end, there's a beginning too.
Well, great. That is wonderful. So, Brigitte, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights. It's really been enlightening.
Thank you for having me, Edward.
Well, folks, this is WRM Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach and host of this podcast. To learn more about my coaching practice, you go to www.prodestinycoaching.com. On that website, you'll be able to take a work quiz. Check that out and then contact me so we can talk about it. And Brigitte, do you have a website that you'd like to share about what you do?
Yes, mine is www.heartandcodivorcecoaching.com.
Great. So what you've heard, there was a lot of good information. The one thing that Brigitte and I have in common, and that is relationships work for those who work on them. In my case, it's work relationships. With Brigitte's case, it's personal relationships. But at any rate, relationships work for those who work on them.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.